When a once celebrated author falls from grace and loses everything, a chance encounter with a stranger offers her a second chance, but only if she dares to face her past and trust again. Sarah Williams sat in the small, dimly lit apartment, staring at the blank page before her. It had been months since she had written a word, months since this scandal had turned her life upside down. She had once been a household name, her books flying off the shelves, her face gracing magazine covers. But all of that had crumbled in a matter of days. The plagiarism accusations, the media frenzy, the harsh public judgment, it had shattered her, leaving her with nothing but the heavy weight of regret. She ran a hand through her messy hair and looked around her apartment, the walls closing in with every passing second. It was a far cry from the beautiful homes she used to stay in. The days of luxurious book launches and travel were long gone. Now, her world consisted of faded walls, a cheap couch, and an overwhelming sense of emptiness. A former star, now nothing more than a cautionary tale. The phone on the table buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at it, another email from a former friend, offering condolences, but also a reminder of what she had lost. She quickly deleted it, not wanting to relive it. With a sigh, she slipped on her jacket and decided to go for a walk. It was the only way she could clear her mind these days. The park wasn't far from her apartment. As she walked, she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her, the constant reminder of her failure. The leaves in the trees rustled as the wind picked up, and Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stay warm. She glanced around at the families walking by, the couples enjoying the autumn afternoon, the children laughing in the distance. They seemed so ... content. It made her feel even more isolated. She sat down on a bench, not really caring where, just needing a moment to breathe. As she stared at the ground, lost in thought, a voice interrupted her. "Nice day for a walk, isn't it?" Startled, Sarah looked up to see an older man sitting beside her. His clothes were plain, nothing fancy, and his face was weathered, marked with age, but his eyes were kind. He had the look of someone who had lived a full life, and somehow that was oddly comforting. "Yeah," Sarah replied, her voice soft. "It's nice." The man smiled, and there was a quiet warmth in the way he looked at her. For a moment, Sarah almost felt like he could see beyond the facade she had built, the one that hid her brokenness, her regret. She quickly dismissed the thought, trying to brush it off. "It's a good place for thinking," the man continued. "Sometimes I come here to clear my head." Sarah nodded absently, unsure what to say. She wasn't in the mood for conversation, but something about this stranger made her feel safe, even though she didn't know him. She turned her gaze back to the park, trying to ignore the small, painful lump in her throat. "I've seen you here before," the man said, his voice gentle. "I can tell when someone's got a lot on their mind. You look like you could use someone to talk to." Sarah was taken aback by his words. She wasn't used to strangers noticing her, let alone offering to listen. She hadn't spoken much to anyone in months, but there was something in his tone that made her hesitate. I'm not sure there's much to say," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't press her. He just nodded and turned his gaze to the horizon, giving her space. For a long time, neither of them spoke, the quiet only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. It was strange but comforting. She felt the tension in her chest ease, just a little. Finally, after a long silence, the man spoke again. "I used to be a teacher, you know. But sometimes life doesn't go the way you expect it to. I had big dreams once. Thought I had it all figured out. But I learned that even when things fall apart, there's always another chance. Just have to look for it." Sarah glanced at him, surprised by his words. There was no pity in his voice, no judgment, just a quiet understanding that reached her in a way she hadn't expected. She had expected scorn, whispers, maybe even the cold shoulder, but this man was different. He didn't seem to care about her past. He wasn't looking for her to explain anything. "I don't know if I can get back to where I was," she admitted, her voice trembling just slightly. "I lost everything. I don't think anyone will ever trust me again." The man turned to her then, his expression kind. "You'd be surprised," he said. "It's not about what others think. It's about what you're willing to do with what you have left. Sometimes it's the smallest steps that lead to the biggest changes." Sarah didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but there was something about his words that made her feel a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that she thought had died long ago. It was strange she'd heard similar advice before, but it had never felt this real. "Thanks," she said quietly, unsure of what else to add. I think I needed to hear that." The man smiled, a warm, knowing smile. "Anytime," he said simply. He stood up slowly, gathering his things. "Take care of yourself, Sarah. You'll be okay." Sarah watched as he walked away, a little stunned. He knew her name, but she hadn't told him. It was as if he had seen right through her, knew the depth of her pain, and yet there was no judgment, no condemnation. Just quiet understanding. As she sat there, her heart felt lighter. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she had thought. Maybe there was a second chance out there for her. And maybe, just maybe, she could take the first step toward it. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself returning to the park again and again. Each time, she walked the familiar path with the same sense of heaviness. But now there was a strange comfort in knowing that someone, even a stranger, had seen her for who she was. Not just a fallen author, but a person with hopes and fears, still holding on to the smallest fragments of her former self. James, the man she'd met on the bench, had been right. The park had become her refuge, a place where she could breathe and think, without the weight of the world bearing down on her. The air seemed fresher, the trees taller, and the soft crunch of the fallen leaves beneath her feet had a grounding effect she couldn't explain. Each time she arrived, James was there, sitting on the same bench with his sketchbook in hand. He was always working on something, a sketch of the landscape, a quick doodle of a passerby, or sometimes just the shape of the clouds in the sky. His presence felt steady, like the calm after a storm. He never pressed her to talk, but he was always there when she needed someone to listen. On one of these days, Sarah sat down beside him without a word, her hands folded in her lap. She had no plan to speak, but James seemed to sense that something was different in her silence. "You know," he began, his voice gentle as always, "sometimes the hardest part isn't what we've lost. It's finding the courage to begin again. You seem like you've been carrying that weight for a while." Sarah looked at him, surprised by how deeply he seemed to understand her without asking. He had a way of seeing through the walls she'd built, the mask she wore every day. "I don't even know where to start," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's changed. I don't know if I can even write again. My books are in the past now." James closed his sketchbook slowly, as if giving her the space to speak. "You know, I once gave up my own dreams. Took care of someone else's needs instead of my own. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a slow burn. A quiet surrender. But here's the thing I've learned. It's never too late to find your way back." Sarah's eyes lowered to the ground, her fingers nervously tapping her knees. She had heard similar things before, from friends, from family, from her therapist. But James's words didn't feel the same. They didn't feel like empty comfort. He wasn't promising that everything would magically fall into place. He was telling her that the effort mattered, even if the outcome wasn't guaranteed. "Why do you believe that?" she asked, finally meeting his gaze. He smiled slightly. "Because I've seen it. Not with my own eyes, but with others. People can be knocked down hard and still get up. They might never return to where they were, but they can always rebuild, reshape what's left of themselves. You might not write the same kind of books as before, but maybe that's not what matters anymore. His words hung in the air between them, soft and weighty. Sarah wasn't sure what to think. Could she really rebuild her life? Could she write again? The idea seemed almost impossible, but the seed of doubt that had taken root in her heart seemed to stir just a little. "Do you think I should try?" she asked, the question more vulnerable than she intended. James nodded slowly. "I think you should do whatever feels right for you. Writing, it's not about pleasing others. It's about finding something inside of you that's worth sharing, even if it's just for yourself." That night, Sarah went home with the same heaviness in her chest, but something else had begun to stir inside her, an ember, faint and fragile, but burning just enough to keep her moving forward. She placed her jacket over the back of the chair and sat at her desk, staring at the blank screen before her. It had been so long since she had even tried to write, and the words wouldn't come easily. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of how to begin, but then she remembered James's words. It's not about pleasing others. She exhaled slowly and began to type. Her thoughts scattered but growing clearer with every word. The first few sentences were shaky, uncertain, but she didn't stop. For the first time in a long while, the act of writing didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a breath. The next few days unfolded in much the same way. Sarah returned to the park, and James was there, always sketching, always with a quiet presence that anchored her. Each time they spoke, their conversations became deeper, and Sarah began to open up more about her fears and her doubts. She told him about the nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she could ever come back from what had happened. "I'm so afraid," she confessed one afternoon, her voice thick with emotion. "What if I'm just wasting my time? What if I write and it's not enough? What if the world doesn't care anymore?" James listened carefully, never rushing her to finish. When she was done, he finally spoke, his tone steady but firm. "The world may not care, but you'll care. And that's what matters. The first step is always the hardest, but it's the only way forward." The words stuck with her. Sarah had spent so much time worrying about the world's judgment, about whether her work would ever be enough again. But maybe it was time to stop thinking about what others would think and start focusing on what she wanted to say. By the end of the week, she had filled several pages in her notebook, the first pages of a story she never thought she'd write again. She didn't know where it would go, but for the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring inside her. Hope. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet, mornings and long afternoons spent writing. Sometimes in the park, sometimes in her cramped apartment. Sarah had never felt so raw and exposed, yet strangely alive. Every time she picked up the pen or sat before her computer, her hands trembled, but the words flowed with more ease than she expected. She didn't write for fame anymore, or the validation she once craved. This time, it was for her, a way to rebuild what she had lost. To find something she thought she'd never see again, joy in the act of creation. James, as always, was there, offering his quiet encouragement. Their conversations grew deeper, and Sarah found herself looking forward to their meetings more than anything else in her day. It wasn't just his wisdom she valued, though. It was his kindness, the way he never seemed to judge her, never saw her as a failure. She had never had that from anyone, not really. Everyone around her had always viewed her success as a reflection of her worth. When that success crumbled, so did their respect for her. One chilly afternoon, Sarah met James in the park as usual. The air had turned crisp, and the trees were shedding their last golden leaves. She found him sitting on the same bench, his sketchbook open on his lap. He wasn't sketching today. Instead, he was staring thoughtfully at the sky, as if lost in the clouds. "Writing anything today?" he asked, his voice gentle as he noticed her approach. Yes, Sarah said, sitting beside him. I've been working on a new story. It's different from what I used to write, but I think it's good. I think it matters. James nodded slowly, his gaze shifting from the sky to her. That's good. Keep at it. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Sarah felt the quiet peace between them, the kind she hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't the peace of having everything figured out, it was the peace of acceptance, of being exactly where she was supposed to be, without expectation or pressure. But then, as if he sensed the shift in her mood, James broke the silence. I talked to an old friend of mine the other day, he said casually. He told me about a small literary agency that's been looking for new voices. People who've fallen off the radar, people who've been through hard times but still have stories to tell. Sarah felt her pulse quicken at his words, a wave of excitement and fear washing over her. A literary agency? She repeated, her voice quiet, unsure if she had heard him right. Do you think they'd be interested in me? James's eyes softened with the kind of certainty that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. I think they'd be lucky to have you. If you believe in your work, then that's all that matters. You'll find your way back. It's not about what happened in the past, it's about what you do with the future. The words felt like a lifeline thrown into the storm of her doubts. Sarah had been so afraid of stepping back into the world of publishing. The thought of facing the industry again, after everything she had been through, terrified her. But James was right. It wasn't about the past. It was about what she could still do, what she could still offer. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself unable to stop thinking about the agency. Could she really do it? Could she submit her work, put herself out there again after all that had happened? She knew that fear would follow her, no matter where she went. But there was something different now, something stronger than the fear. The spark of hope James had ignited within her was still flickering. Growing doubt one evening, after hours of pacing and contemplating, Sarah finally took the plunge. She dusted off the manuscript she had been working on, the one she'd written without any expectations, just for herself. Her heart raced as she clicked send on the email, attaching the file to a simple note. I believe in this story. I hope you do too. The next few days were a blur of nerves and anticipation. Sarah could barely concentrate on anything. She kept checking her phone, expecting a reply, but it didn't come. Her doubt crept in again, filling the empty spaces where confidence once resided. Maybe they didn't like it. Maybe they thought it wasn't worth publishing. She had no idea what she would do if that happened. But then, just when she thought she couldn't wait another minute, the email notification popped up on her phone. Her heart skipped as she opened it, her hands trembling. Dear Ms. Williams, thank you for submitting your manuscript. We are excited to inform you that we would love to move forward with your project. We believe your story has real potential, and we would be honored to work with you. Sarah sat frozen for a moment, the words blurring in front of her eyes. She read them again, just to be sure. The publisher was interested. They wanted her work. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she sat back in her chair. For the first time in so long, she felt something she had forgotten: hope. She wasn't just getting her career back. She was reclaiming a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. That night, as she sat in her apartment, staring at the email on her screen, Sarah thought of James. He had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time, she knew she was on the right one. The weeks that followed the publisher's email felt like a whirlwind, a blur of excitement, anxiety, and the overwhelming realization that Sarah was on the brink of something she hadn't thought possible. Her manuscript was being reviewed, and every moment that passed seemed to stretch the anticipation further. Every new email, every phone call felt like a puzzle piece falling into place. Yet Sarah couldn't shake the fear that it might all collapse. Just as quickly as it had started, but as time went on, something began to shift inside her. The excitement that had once filled her with dread now turned into determination. She no longer saw the path ahead as a treacherous climb. Instead, it felt like a new beginning, a chance to take control of her life again. She had spent so much of her time focusing on what she had lost, but now she was starting to see the pieces of what she could still build. James continued to be a steady presence in her life. They met in the park every few days, and he would ask her how the process was going, never pushing, just offering a quiet ear. He listened to her doubts, celebrated her small victories, and most importantly, reminded her that every step forward, no matter how small, was worth taking. "You've come a long way," he said one afternoon, after Sarah shared the latest news about her manuscript. "It's easy to forget that sometimes, but you've done more than just write a book. You've rebuilt yourself piece by piece." His words sank deep within her, like a gentle reassurance she didn't know she needed. He was right. She hadn't just written a book. She had reclaimed her voice, her passion, her purpose. And no matter what happened next, that was something no one could take from her. A few days later, she received another email from the publisher. She nearly didn't open it, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. But she did, and her breath caught in her chest as she read the first few lines. "Dear Ms. Williams, after careful consideration, we are thrilled to inform you that we are offering you a publishing contract for your manuscript. We are excited to bring your story to readers everywhere." Sarah's hands shook as she sat back in her chair. The words blurred again, but this time, it wasn't from uncertainty. It was from a rush of emotion she had been holding back for so long. She had done it. After everything, after all the doubts, the fear, and the failure, she had done it. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to cry. The tears were a mix of relief, disbelief, and the overwhelming sense of something beautiful being born from the ashes of her past. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had taken the first step toward it. The next few weeks passed in a haze of meetings, edits, and preparations for her book's release. Sarah worked tirelessly, pouring every ounce of energy into the project. She wasn't just writing anymore. She was crafting something she could be proud of, something that reflected not just her talent, but her journey, her story of transformation. One evening, as Sarah reviewed the final draft of her manuscript, she glanced out the window. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. She had come so far. The path had been hard, filled with setbacks and obstacles, but she was standing on the other side, stronger than before. Her phone buzzed on the desk, and she picked it up without thinking. It was a message from James. "Just wanted to say I'm proud of you, Sarah. You've done something remarkable. Keep going, and never forget that this journey was yours to choose." Tears pricked at her eyes again, but this time they were different. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of gratitude, of acknowledgement. She had finally found her way back, and it wasn't just because of the book or the contract. It was because she had allowed herself to believe in the possibility of second chances. The day her book was released, Sarah stood in front of a room full of strangers, her heart racing. The launch was everything she had hoped for, a quiet yet profound celebration of everything she had overcome. The excitement in the air was palpable, but for Sarah, it was more than just the success of the book. It was the moment she had dreamed of since she had first picked up a pen. It was her moment of redemption. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on James, who stood in the back, his familiar smile lighting up the space. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was a testament to the bond they had formed. to the belief he had shown in her when she couldn't believe in herself. As Sarah took the stage, she felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. She wasn't just standing in front of these people as an author. She was standing as a woman who had fought her way back from the darkest of places. She was standing as proof that no matter how many times you fall, you can always find the strength to rise again. She finished her speech, and the applause filled the room. But for Sarah, it wasn't the applause that mattered. It was the quiet, the stillness inside her heart, knowing that she had not only written a new chapter in her career, but in her life. A life she had reclaimed one word at a time, and as she looked at James, his smile still there, unwavering and proud, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning. No matter how far you've fallen or how impossible it seems, you always have the power to rebuild and rise again. The true strength lies not in avoiding failure, but in having the courage to begin anew, embrace second chances, and trust that you are more than your mistakes. With belief in yourself and the support of those who see your potential, the journey of redemption and transformation can lead you to places you never imagined. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspirational tales. And make sure to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video. Keep believing in second chances. Your story isn't over yet.